Hello and welcome to the Enterprise Talk Conversation Series, a peer knowledge resource by the CXOs for the CXOs. Now to our host, Kanika Goswami.
So good evening, Bjoern. For the listeners of Enterprise Talk, we have Bjoern Herrmann, who's the Vice President for AI Labs at Sage. He's joining us today for a short conversation. How are you doing, Herrmann? Oh, Bjoern.
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Pleasure. So we'll just jump into the questions right away. So the first question I have for you is, what challenges are enterprises facing today for efficiently managing their finances?
Yeah, so the goal of of efficiently managing your finances is that in the end you're compliant, you're able to drive the business planning, you identify problems in the business, you prioritize effectively, you allocate resources effectively, you're able to control your performance and so forth, right? So those are the goals. Now the challenges to get there is just a slow periodic close process. Just takes a very long time to get the data that you need. You need to get them from all sorts of people, typically in the business. It takes a while to get everyone to do that. There's challenges around compliance. There is just generally a lack of trust in the data, in the reporting. And then with that, there is a lack of visibility into the business. And on top of it, a lot of business have poor financial KPIs, so they don't really have the kind of KPIs they need to drive decisions. And then, but even if they have those KPIs, oftentimes they'll have a lack of context to really make sense of those numbers. And so, as a result of all of these challenges, businesses perform more poorly, or some even fail as a result of just not being able to manage their finances effectively. And so with Sage, we're trying to tackle all of those challenges and really help businesses, rise above those sort of, daily challenges and really be able to focus on the strategic decisions that you can drive with financial data.
Right. And do you think these challenges have exacerbated or have they reduced in the current circumstances when the teams are so broken up geographically and, organizations have become, kind of fragmented all over the place? So do you think these challenges are a little higher now, or do you think it's easier to handle them with fragmented organizations?
Fragmented, you mean because of COVID, that people work in different, that they're working
Yes,
from home? Yeah.
correct.
Yeah. Well, I think that it depends on the business. It depends on how the business is set up to work in a distributed manner, I would think. And obviously, any sort of technology solution can help bridge, the sort of or can help with this distributed setting, right? So any business that works still, with pen and paper or does a lot of stuff, you know, manually, they'll have more challenges than companies that are using more technology, that have more automation in place. And then, beyond that, I think it's really about just whether the company is set up to work in a distributed way. And so, some companies are, some companies are not.
Right. So now we will come to the artificial intelligence part of the story, since you are obviously heading the team at Sage. Do you think today's enterprises have the required budgets to invest in AI-enabled technologies, given the current business limitations? And my question would also be, even if there are no business limitations, do you think enterprises are investing enough in AI-based technologies to keep them ready for the future?
Well, it is what it is, right? So I think that um, businesses like us need to build products that fit fit the bill, so that costs as much as what people can pay for. So the willingness to pay of businesses, determines what we are going to build for them. But then at the same time, of course, all of these investments into AI are should be driving costs down, or should help businesses to grow faster, and so there should be return on investment, of course, which means that over time, the assumption is that yes, of course, every business should be able to move there. It's just that some businesses will be moving there maybe a little slower, and some a little faster, depending on their appetite and their ability to invest in the space. So
Right. Now, and how do you think AI-enabled finance tools empower leaders to make better business decisions? So this is specifically for the fintech and the BFSI industry, but even otherwise, how do you think leaders get empowered using AI tools, the kind of tools that you develop at AI Labs at Sage?
so there is it's kind of two primary areas. One is really kind of taking care of all the basics, which is what we talked about earlier, just helping to automate the data capture, make sure that you can trust the data, via continuous insurance. So we, for example, just built a service in one of Sage's products, Intact, that automatically detects outliers and helps during the approval process to find those. And that's one part, the continuous data capture and trust. And then the second part is the sort of active insights or continuous insights that we've been talking about, which is really about helping businesses to make better decisions. And when you look at why most businesses fail, it's primarily because they very efficiently execute the unnecessary, right? So they do things that later on turn out to be irrelevant. And AI can ultimately help the business to really focus on the things that matter. It can help them identify the things that are going wrong, and can help them reallocate resources in a way that they will get the biggest bang for their buck. And so, this is kind of where leveraging AI, we can essentially we can first of all create a data set that you can trust, and then turn that data set into a set of KPIs that can help drive decisions. We can provide benchmarks to help identify problems and opportunities to just sort of contextualize those KPIs. We can then provide recommendations on top of those problems and opportunities, and get a business as close as possible to a decision. So, for example, let's say we have a food retailer. They have really great revenue growth, but then when they look at their COV, their lifetime value over acquisition cost ratio, they'll see that that's actually doing pretty poorly compared to their peers. So now they can, instead of focusing on building out their sales, they can say, hey, let's maybe look at our conversion funnels. Let's look at other metrics that are impacting this ratio, and maybe they find out that their repurchase rate is poor for their peers, and as a recommendation of increasing their repurchase rate, we will tell them, well, maybe you should introduce a subscription program, because that will help you drive up repurchase rate, will give you better unit economics, so you get better lifetime value over acquisition cost, and then from there you can grow in a much healthier way. So that would be an example for the type of insights that we could help drive.
Sorry. So in the beginning of this answer, you had mentioned that a lot of organizations put in a lot of effort in doing a lot of unnecessary work, if I'm not mistaken. So would you also say that AI helps to do a lot of cost optimization for operations if it's adopted and implemented intelligently? Would you agree for that?
Yeah, yeah. It's basically, like one of the things that we can start doing is we can start providing benchmarks around cost, right? So you can start looking at whatever office cost or but basically all the different cost items that you have in the business, and we can help you see, okay, which ones, you know, um, are most likely, no, where do you have the biggest room for improvement, basically, based on your peers. So, that can help reduce cost. And yeah.
Correct. Now, the last question essentially, how do you drive the artificial intelligence based transformation in businesses? And we are talking about driving transformation on the ground that goes beyond product strategy. So at this point of time and at the time leading up to the pandemic, before the pandemic started, what was the kind of work you were doing in driving this transformation?
Yeah, so the mission for my team is to drive the AI transformation for Sage so that we can realize the Sage Business Cloud vision. And what this really means is that it's more important for us to build out the capability at this time, and to really sort of build the muscle, than to build the most amazing um, moonshot AI features. And in practice, means that we sort of have three groups within Sage or Sage AI Labs. One that really drives the delivery of pilot projects. We have a second one that drives upskilling. So as we go in and work with different groups inside of Sage, we start to upskill the team along with the pilot projects. And then we have an infrastructure group that builds out infrastructure and tooling to really empower all of the AI projects to just move at a high speed. This is really where typically, most AI projects, a lot of AI projects end up failing because there isn't a quick way to get new AI features into production. So um, that's how we're set up. And then we have the reason that we've sort of taken this approach, which is very sort of a very agile, lean approach, is because we've seen that a lot of enterprises are failing at their AI efforts. I think it's depending on what uh, you know outlet you look at, it's somewhere between 80 to 90%, right? That of AI projects that end up failing. And the reason is primarily because either the companies are just not set up in terms of the infrastructure and talent, or because companies don't effectively manage the uncertainty that those projects bring with them, right? So all of sort of these new AI projects have a lot of uncertainty because it's a new way of building product. There's a lot of new things to learn. There's new business models that come along with it. There's a lot of new things that need to be figured out that you can't just sort of plan out 5 years in advance and execute on it. You need to be really agile and try to learn as much as you can as you go through the process. So that's sort of where we're coming from. And then um, you know we over time, our goal is to get each and every single group inside of Sage to a point where they don't need our help anymore. So where they can drive the delivery on of AI features on their own, and we sort of turn more into, let's say, an advisory and innovation group that supports, but isn't really involved day to day. And that will be, if we get there, so that'll be our success, right? Because that's where we have turned the entire organization to be AI enabled. So.
Yes. And do you think anything has changed because of the pandemic and the situation that enterprises are facing today in terms of, their budgets, their operations, their limitations that they're facing? Has anything changed on ground in your strategy because of that?
Our strategy has not changed. Obviously there's always, some impact here and there, but I wouldn't say that there's any significant impact. In fact, we've even during the pandemic doubled down on driving this AI transformation because we see it, to be so important for Sage as a business, because we believe that in the future, the majority of Sage products are going to have some sort of AI capability. And so, you know, therefore we're investing into this and really pushing forward on making it happen.
And you're also doing it because the industry needs it?
Yeah, of course. I mean, that's the fundamental assumption that customers, want to have products that help them to be more successful. And I think that AI can do that by just simply automating and augmenting a lot of the existing processes and by enabling them to make much better decisions. Yeah. So yes,
Correct.
yes.
So I'm wishing you the best of luck in doing this, Bjorn, and thank you so much for extremely informative inputs that you've shared with us. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much for being with us. Please do follow us on social media for regular updates and new content.